Hello, my name is Ted. I am a repair technician for Whole Latte Love, and we have Mark behind the camera. This video is to show you how to remove and put a new grinder assembly in a Gaggia Titanium. And this is basically all the things that you're going to need. This is what I use when I work on them. I've been working here for almost 9 years. We have a flat blade screwdriver. We have a Phillips screwdriver. Doesn't matter if it's long, short, magnetic, or whatever. I mean, magnetic would be helpful. We have a shorter, it doesn't matter on the length either on this, but the shorter the better because you're just going to be working close with screws on the top and back. But it's a fine point. It's a lot different than this one, mainly because the screws on the housing are a small Phillips head.
Okay.
Okay. And then we got a couple of zip ties, just a couple, like, you know, not even 6 inches. We're just going to tie up some cables on the inside when we're done. And then a pretty long one. This one's probably about a 14 incher. It doesn't need to be quite that long, but you'll see why we need the long zip tie once we are buttoning things up.
If I didn't have a real long one, could I put a couple together?
They could put a couple together. That probably could work. It just be a matter of how to position the connection area.
Sure.
And then we got a little pair of clippers for cutting off the excess and also cutting zip ties inside the housing. And then this is the grinder motor assembly that customers will be receiving, which is what we're going to be putting into the machine.
All right.
And removing the other one. Okay?
Let's roll.
So we're going to remove all of our accessories and just set them off to the side. We're going to take both bean hopper covers off, get those out of the way. This one wants to be stubborn, okay. I like to use the bean hopper lid, the outer one, as my tray for the screws. We'll take the bypass off. Make sure the machine is unplugged. You clean out all your beans. There's no water, everything. You know, just take and empty everything out. So we have all the accessories moved except for the front, which we don't need to worry about. So there's 2 screws. You see I already have one out. They're little tiny Phillips head screws to remove the bypass funnel. So we're just going to go ahead and take those out. Like I said, I already took one out. They're a fine thread short screw. You can't mix them up with the rest. And then the bean hopper has got 3 screws. We're just going to move right onto the screws. There's 3 spots where the screw goes. I already have 2 of them removed. They're all the same type of screw. They're a coarse thread pointed one. So you can't really mix up the screws when you're putting everything back together on this housing. So that's the 3 screws there. And then on the back of the housing or the machine, you have 2 openings right here for screws. I already got that one out. They're a black screw, a very long fine point, coarse thread. They can be somewhat of a pain to get out, especially if you don't have a magnetic tip. This one doesn't want to come out. It's unthreaded. It's just you gotta coax it out so you can at least get like a fingernail underneath it and get it to pull out, because the hole's so deep.
Sure.
But there's 2 of those to remove on the back. That's all we need that screwdriver for. So now you can remove the funnel. There is a rubber thing that goes around this thing. Sometimes it'll stay here. Most of the time it goes with the funnel. I usually just make sure it stays with the funnel.
Okay.
We'll set that off the side. The bean hopper. Normally I tell you to keep track of the settings, but we're not going to worry about that because we're putting a new grinder in. Those are usually calibrated to the finest setting anyway, but I'll show you how to do that later on when we get there. So we're not going to keep track of these. We don't have to worry about it. I'll show you what you need to do when we put the new bean hopper back on, or the bean hopper back onto the new grinder.
Okay.
So you can just pull that straight up and out. Sometimes this rubber boot, which is a funnel thing basically that goes onto the grinder and keeps the beans from spilling out around inside your machine, will stick to the hopper and come with it. If not, you know, just pull it out.
Okay.
After that, we're going to turn the machine to the side, and now you're going to lift up on the back of the top panel, just like that.
Okay.
Okay. And then you can slide it back this way out of the front area here where there's a lip.
Lip there.
That goes underneath here. Okay. Now there's going to be 3 wires. These 2 are to heat up the top of the tray for your cup warming area. You can unplug them. It doesn't matter which one goes where. It just supplies power to this block that heats up your tray. This is your ground. There's a little
tab on this.
spring clip tab thing on there that you can push down and slide it off.
Okay.
If you have a problem with that, you can always use a flat blade screwdriver and kind of pry with it and it'll pop it free. So we got the top panel off. We're going to set that off to the side. Now we can take the back panel and just pull it back away from the front of the machine. It'll just
It's going to peel it back.
peel
right?
it back, yeah.
Okay.
And you don't have to do this, but I do this when I work on the machine. I take the back panel right off and get it out of my way. I use a flat blade screwdriver to get that rubber tubing started.
Okay.
And once I pry it like this and get it started, I can just pull it off.
Sure.
Sometimes it can be a lot more difficult to do so. And then you got a little tiny screwdriver screw here on the sensor. Now I will say that the sensor, when we go to put it back on, has to be on a certain way. Just like this. This black part has to be facing the top of the machine, but also facing the inside of the machine when the panel is back on.
Okay.
People can accidentally put it on upside down. They can put it on like this, and vice versa.
Okay.
You know, so there's multiple ways you can actually put it on, but this is
that's
the
the
way it
proper.
needs to be on.
Okay.
Because if it's in on any other way, the water tank will not register on the sensor correctly. Sometimes the machine will tell you to add water all the time because the sensor is not in the correct position.
Okay.
So now we got that disconnected in the water line. We can set that off to the side. My screwdriver fell on the floor, and Mark helped me out and kicked it back towards me.
Always here for you, Ted.
Thank you. So this is the inside. This is where your grinder is, and we have to remove that. In order to do so, the first thing that I'm going to do is, one, I'm just going to remove this ground wire off of this little solenoid block because there's two screws I need to get to down there for this guide arm thing for the doser adjustment.
Okay.
So we're just going to pull that off. Same deal. It's got a little spring thing on it, just like the other one. Sometimes it'll just pull right off on this one. We're just going to set that off to the side. We're going to move these wires out of our way for the heat tray on top. Now we're going to get the other Phillips screwdriver, and you're going to remove these two screws right here that hold in, if I can see. There we go. All right, that one's a little difficult to get because of the ground connection right there, but if you get on it on an angle, you'll be able to get it out.
Okay.
As you can see, I'm unthreading it. Sometimes they'll come with the magnetic tip. If not, don't worry about it. And then we got one more right here. It's got a little flat washer underneath it. Okay. We're going to unscrew that. I'm going to try to work with Mark here in his camera.
I'm trying to stay out of your way.
So we just continue unscrewing this screw, and you can see the whole guide arm support thing is wiggly now. As soon as I get this screw all the way out, I can pull the whole thing out with it. We're going to set this off the side. I will point out that this little pin right here on the bottom side, where my finger is, goes into this little rectangle slot. This is what goes back and forth to adjust your dosage amount.
Okay.
So we got to make sure when we put this back together that that pin goes in there.
And you'll show us that.
Yeah, we'll see that eventually, but you won't have to matter where it is for the
Okay.
dose amount. Just
Right.
got to make sure it's in there.
Okay.
So we'll just set that off to the side. After that, we can remove this screw. This one's got a big washer on it. This goes over the neck of the grinder. It kind of holds it in position and pushes it down because this grinder has a long funnel neck on it.
Okay.
So we're just going to take that one out. And get that out of the way, take the washer out with it, set that off to the side. Now just keep track where all your screws go. If you have a certain method or madness that you want to use, go for it. But this video should help you, put everything back. Now if I pull up on it, you can see the whole grinder is going to wiggle free. It's got 3 rubber mounts that are holding it in. There's these rubber pegs that are sticking up out through the mount. All we got to do is go underneath one of the mounts with a flat blade screwdriver and just pry up until it pops free.
Okay.
Same with this side, pry up, and that popped out. Now there's one more on the front side that you can't really do that on, but because you got these two, hold any wires that are in your way back, and you can pull up and get it to pop out.
Okay.
Now you will get some grinder mess because you're probably going to have some grinds inside this funnel. You're going to spill it a little bit as you're getting it out. Sometimes this little rubber sleeve will slide off. It literally just goes back on one way. There's a curve to it. That is basically to create a seal between this opening and this funnel when we go to put it back in.
Okay.
So we got to make sure this goes on the new one. Okay. So now we got the grinder freed up. We're going to have to cut this zip tie right here. This is where the little clippers come in. You just get up underneath there as much as you can and just cut it. And then pull it out. Just slides right out. And then we can pull the cover off of the control board area. The reason why we do that is because we got to unplug the grinder cable to the board so we can plug the new one in.
Okay.
And it's the black and white one that's to the left here at the front of the board, right next to this heat block. So we're going to pull that off, just like that. Then we got to cut a couple of zip ties usually. There's one right here. Be careful not to cut any of the wires. We're going to cut that one. And then we got this one here that wraps around the whole bundle. So again, cut it, but don't cut any of the wires. Now all this is freed up. We can feed this wire. This white one, which is the sensor, is usually wound up around it. Sometimes you can unwind it and loosen it up a little bit. You can unwind it too, just make sure you wind it back up so there's not a lot of extra cable for this sensor. So if you push the wire down through this, you can start wiggling it through and getting it out. They got this one wound up really good. I might have to unwind this one a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to, on this one, usually they're not wound up this much, unwind it. Just so I can get that to come through. There, we're getting close. All right, so this is going to come through that little bunch of wires.
Okay.
And that is your grinder wire. Now we can pull it right out of here and you can fish the wire through until it comes out with it.
Okay.
Okay? That's how to remove the grinder. Set this off to the side. Back there's good.
Now, should we vacuum this out or anything?
Yeah, you can vacuum it out at this point.
Okay.
I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to show you how to put the new one back in. But yeah, you're going to want to vacuum out any mess that you have right here so it doesn't cause problems or messes later on for you or whatever. The other thing I want to point out is these little rubber necks that I popped off from the mount of the grinder. Sometimes will come with the grinder because they have the same kind of point on the underside. If they come with the grinder, bring it, take it off of the grinder mount and put it back in the opening.
Okay.
And then pull the peg through to lock it in on the bottom side.
Kind of seats in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On each one of these, there's a peg.
Okay.
You can see that I'm pulling with my finger.
Right.
Okay. Same deal as on the top. Sure. You want to make sure these are in place before putting the new grinder in because it'll be harder if they're on the grinder and you get them lined up. You won't be able to get to this back peg to pull it through.
Okay.
So it's just easier to pull them through and lock them in with the grinder out of the way. All right, so now we just got to put the new grinder into the machine after we took the old one out. And that's just a matter of grabbing the new assembly that you have, and the wires come with it, and they're zip tied to the motor like they're supposed to be. We do need the rubber part off from the other grinder. It just pulls off, and then it goes right back onto the other one. It has like a little sleeve all the way around it. You can clean it off if you really want to, but it's just going to get grounds on all over it anyway. Okay. It's just, like I said, it's to create a seal between that opening and this grinder chute itself. All right, so now we got that on there. We can start feeding the wire through the opening, grab it to the other side, and then once we get it down to a certain point, you're going to see that the wires are still pointing up. You can kind of bend them and point them downwards as you're feeding it in, like that.
Okay.
Mainly the white one. The other one doesn't like to cause a problem.
Okay.
So now you got it through the opening, you can actually feed it, and as you're feeding it, watch everything down here. You got a tube that'll sometimes get in your way from letting you drop it down. You know, usually there's a nice opening from where it was sitting previously anyway. Okay. Once you get it down in there far enough, you can see, well, my rubber piece came off. Keep an eye on that. You can see we're almost in a position now. It's kind of sitting in there. We're going to just kind of line it up each of these arms on the grinder needs to go into these rubber peg holes.
Okay.
And sometimes that takes a little maneuvering and just kind of wiggling back and forth until you get it to fall in place. And then the front one, you know, if you have a hard time, you can lift up on the one side a little bit and kind of maneuver it in there.
Okay.
Okay. At that point is when you're going to take a pair of pliers, and in this case I'm using my fingers, and grab and push down and pull on the rubber leg. You can see how it popped through the opening.
Right.
And you got to do that on all 3 of them.
So if you get your fingers in there, fine, or maybe...
Fingers or needle nose
nose
pliers,
pliers.
which are usually easier, and I just didn't grab them.
Okay.
Especially on this one, which you can't really get your fingers in there unless you have really tiny fingers.
Sure.
I think I got it. So yes, these are just basically to lock it in. I'm having a hard time with this one. There we go.
There we go.
So that's just to lock the grinder and hold it into place.
Okay.
And, you know, give absorption to the movement of it. We have the front part that's down. This one's up a little bit because the grind's underneath it. But just for video purposes, we're not going to worry about that. And that's when you can take the long screw with the flat, big washer that was over here and kind of get it in place and start it with your finger at least a little bit and then tighten it down. And like I said, that literally just kind of holds this into place so it's even with the hole here for the dosing chamber.
Okay.
All right, at that point, we can plug the grinder in. You don't even have to feed it through here if you are OCD-ish like I am. I like to put things back together the way they came apart. So you're just gonna run this up, and it only goes on one way. You got a little lip here that goes towards that clip on the front of the connection. And it really won't let you plug it in backwards anyway. So
Okay.
you're just gonna line it up with the pegs and push it down and lock it in.
Okay.
So now that that's in there, you're all good to go. We can wind this one up a little bit more like it was.
Because you're OCD. No.
Well, you don't really want a lot of excess
want it,
cable
yeah.
on this sensor because it can get pinched somewhere.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, I
You
know.
understand. Okay.
All right, so now that we got that done, we can add a couple of zip ties, one that was around this little bundle of wires here. Just kind of lock that down, and then one around the big bundle. You know, keep an eye out
Both
for
of those,
that sensor wire,
Okay.
and that just keeps everything nice and tidy and cleaned up in there, and then we'll cut off the excess. Again, watching for wires.
Yep.
The long zip tie is for the next thing. That is literally, we're going to put this black cover back on top. You got these 2 arms right here. They go on the other side of these wires, and they kind of lock down in these 2 different openings right here.
Okay.
Okay. It's tricky to get it in there without getting it caught up with the wires. So just give it a few tries. And then the other side's got one little arm right here that kind of just sits down in this opening.
Okay.
All right. And then your bundles of wires, you got one that comes here and then one that comes right here.
So you just need to work that stuff around?
Yeah,
so
once you get it in the right spot, it'll go pretty much in there,
Okay.
just like that. Then for the big zip tie, like I said, it doesn't need to be quite this long, but you need something to be able to fish it down along this side of the housing, which is the easiest way I found how to do it.
Okay.
You just go down here and you'll see it sticking out down here. You're gonna grab this end of the zip tie and just kind of feed it up underneath the bottom side of this housing,
Okay.
keeping clear of wires. You don't wanna draw them up into the housing.
Okay.
Once you get it up far enough, you can start the zip tie like that, and then you can slide it back. There's enough space for the zip tie to slide down through here on this side, and then the other side, you just work back and forth until you get it slid back about halfway.
Okay.
You just want to draw it in so it holds that top
Good,
piece
okay.
on. And then we'll cut off the excess. So that's that. After that, we have our grinder in, we have the 1 screw in, we have everything pretty much set except for the guide arm and the rest of the stuff and our ground wire here.
Okay.
So at this point, it'll be easy to make sure the grinder is calibrated to its finest setting.
Okay.
You can turn it all the way to the left and stop it, and that's when you can pull the grinder right out, the upper burr.
Okay.
Okay, that's your inner burr, the lower one. Okay, so to make sure it's on a 0 calibration for the finest grind, just make sure this blue marking on the one tab that's facing this way. You know, you can turn it, but just make sure it's this way.
Okay.
We'll set it back down in there so it's facing this side where the little adjustment thing is for the arm,
Okay.
for the slider arm. So if it's pointing this way, you're fine.
All right.
And then we're going to turn it, and you'll see that these 3 tabs on the grinder upper burr plate that we just pulled out will disappear with the threads of the collar.
Okay.
See how that goes over the tabs?
Yep.
Okay, so that's bringing the burr down as we spin the collar.
Okay.
And then eventually you're going to hit a stopping point where this red mark right here will be pointing this way. Okay, that means you're at your finest grind setting.
Okay.
So as long as you are all the way over like that, I usually like to back it up 1,
Okay.
just because sometimes that's a little too fine, and you can clog up your grinder a little quicker, especially if it's really too fine.
So when you say back up 1,
So it stops,
Yep.
and then I reverse it 1 click.
so 1 click counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's at your finest grind setting. That's
Okay.
how it's calibrated. We're all good to go. We ain't got to worry about it after that point.
All right.
So now we're going to put the arm back on with your 3 screws. Sometimes they stay with it. If not, don't worry about it. You can just pick them up. We got to make sure that little peg
Yep.
goes into that little arm mechanism.
Okay.
So you're basically going to try to line it up. And this wire, it can be below or above the arm. It doesn't matter. I usually like it below it because it gives it a little bit more play.
Okay.
Instead of being tensed up right up above the arm.
Okay.
So I have the peg in the slot, which is probably going to be hard to see. Let me.
So point out the slot again. Oh yes, now I can see it.
So that peg has to go into that little rectangular slot on the arm.
Point that out one more time, just so we're sure of. Yeah. So that.
So it has to go into that
Okay.
rectangle right there.
Yeah. That's critical, right?
That is critical because if it's not, it won't slide your adjustment door back and forth for your
Okay.
doser.
Okay.
Even though you're turning the knob, it won't
Nothing's gonna
move that.
happen. Okay.
So just make sure it's in there, and when it's in there, you know, just keep an eye on it in case it moves around and you're fishing this thing around and trying to make sure the screw holes line up again. And I'm just trying to make sure everything's lined up. I can't tell. Nope, it's not in there. Okay. And you can move this mechanism back and forth to make sure you're getting it into the rectangle.
Okay.
All right, so I think it's in the rectangle.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can see the
See it moving.
trap door moving right there,
Yeah.
or it was. Okay. It's in there. We're going to start screwing down the 3 screws. You got the
Okay.
2 up in the front here. Sorry, I got to move it because I can't see
Yep.
that much that way.
Yep.
And I usually like to get them started so they're in place.
But not fully tight in there. Like.
Yeah, just trying to get them going. This one, it's hard to see the screw hole, so you just got to move it around until you feel the screw go into the hole that it's supposed to be into.
Okay.
Now we have them all started. We know the arm is in place. We can double check our mechanism to make sure it's working,
Doing its thing. Okay.
which it is.
Okay.
So now we can screw these down all the way. And just tighten them all down so that they stop moving. You don't have to over crank them. You don't want to over crank them because these are plastic mounts and everything, and you'll strip the
those
holes.
out. Yep.
And then the screws won't be able to do what they're supposed to do. So that one's in all the way. Now we can take our ground and just connect it right back to this little connector on the solenoid. Just push it on.
Okay.
Okay. The new grinder's in. This dosing arm, I go all the way in before I put the top back on because that is your minimal amount of dosing.
Okay.
So when we go to put the hopper back on, we know to go to the minimal amount and then the finest grind. That way we ain't got to worry about it. You can go opposite, you can go to the largest dose, whatever you want to do to remember if it's large or minimal.
But just remember.
Just remember, yes.
Okay.
So now we got that done, we can put the back panel back on.
Okay.
And that's just a matter of pushing this tubing back onto the neck of where the tank sits. Get our little screw, which is not magnetic, so don't lose it.
Okay.
Making sure the sensor is on the correct way. I think I put too much, there we go. Like I said, the black part facing towards the top of the panel and facing the inside of the machine.
Okay.
And we're just going to take a little tiny screw and get it started. And this one you definitely don't want to over tighten because it will strip it. You just want to make it so it stops.
Great.
So now the sensor's on. The back panel, we can move these wires back up for the heat tray. Just sits around this edge. You'll see there's little peg arms, a couple of peg arms on the panel here that will go on the inside of the edge.
Okay.
You get it lined up just right, it will actually sit in there just fine. Now if you look on the inside here, it won't go in all the way because you have these two pegs
Okay.
that go into the receiving holes of this grinder support plate. So you're just going to pull up on it and let them go in it.
So point that, okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure I see that, yep. Okay.
Two pegs, these are mounting
Into that
pegs
little-
for the support,
Yep.
and they go into those two holes. So you just kind of pull up on that support plate a little bit and they'll go right in.
Okay.
So now you're in all the way.
Great.
Okay, and then the top part, I usually connect the ground here. Just push it on. And then I usually let the top plate rest on my hand so I can plug in the two connections for the heating thing for the cup tray.
And it makes no difference where those
Makes
go.
no difference where they go.
Okay.
You can connect either one to whatever connection there.
Okay.
And now you got all your wires connected, just make sure that they're not gonna get in your way when you're putting the top plate in. Top plate has to go in the front first, lined up on both sides or else it won't go down. And once you get it, it will fall into place. If it doesn't, you kind of got to just wiggle this back panel a little bit and the two arms here will fall into place. After that, you have three pegs right here on the back panel. I'm pulling this forward a little bit.
Yep.
This has to go behind
Those
like
three.
that.
Okay.
And now this is all seated. You can then, at this point, take your black screws. I'm only going to do one. And push it through here and tighten it down until it stops. What that's doing is drawing this whole top and back panel together. And just go until it stops.
Okay.
So now we're connected there.
So and where would the other screws go?
The other black one would
Yep.
go here.
Okay.
So you only have the two
Just two there. Okay.
coarse thread, pointy black screws. That will take care of those two. After that, it's just a matter of making sure this is back onto your grinder.
Okay.
If you don't have it back on your grinder, what will happen is you'll get a bunch of beans on the inside of your machine, and then you got to open it back up and vacuum it all out.
Okay.
Because I've done it plenty of times in the past.
Oh.
Almost lost it. Especially when you're working on your machine and you forget all about it because you're just trying to cruise along and get things done. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, I got to take it
Spare
out and
part.
clean the beans out. So yeah, it just sits on there. It's got four little grooves all the way around it that sit on these four arms.
Okay.
And you just maneuver it in there and it'll rest in there.
Okay.
Okay. The bean hopper itself, we're going to make sure the grind adjustment is on 0 because that's what we have it set at. The dosage amount is set on the last dot near the minus sign.
Okay.
That's your smallest amount of dose, which is where I have the arm set right now, all the way in, which is the smallest amount.
Okay.
Now we're just going to set it in place, and sometimes you might have to wiggle it around, but this gear has to line up on those, and then this gear has to line up on that.
Right.
So you can actually see them through the bean hopper. I don't know if you can tell on
Handy.
the camera,
Yeah.
but sometimes it doesn't want to go in right away, but this time it did.
Okay. Lucky you.
Sometimes it doesn't want to drop right down in. You might have to wiggle the gear a little bit just to get the
get it.
teeth lined up one way or the other. Once you get it in there, you can see the large gear moving the actual grinder's coarseness back and forth.
Beautiful.
Okay, and then you got your dosage, which you'll see the little arm going back and forth.
Right.
Okay. So once you got that done, then you know it's correct. Hopefully you got it calibrated correctly. As long as you did what I did, it should be corrected or correctly calibrated. We'll just put one screw in for now, but there's 3 of them. Don't over tighten these, it'll strip the holes. So you got 3 here, 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
After that, you take your funnel, Make sure the rubber thing is on it. It's always easiest to have it on there and hold it in with your fingers as you're feeding it in.
Okay.
And that goes through an opening down here. So make sure your cables or anything that might be laying in the way is out of the way. So you're going to feed it in. And once you get really close to the edge, you can let go with your fingers, and the rubber seal should stay with the funnel. If it doesn't, you have to play around with it and get it seated right, because there's a little edge all the way around it that's supposed to be on the side of the funnel.
Okay.
And then it's just a matter of putting those 2 screws in, which we'll just do one. If I can get my fingers to work with me. There we go. So we're just going to tighten that down. You'll see the funnel kind of starting to bow around the screw, which is fine because you want it to draw it into that rubber, and then the screw will kind of go flush with the opening.
Okay.
So that way your lid will sit right on top of it.
Okay.
And that's it.
That's it.
That is all you need to do to change the grinder. After this, it's just a matter of putting your accessories back on, make sure all your screws are in, and testing it out afterwards.
All right, Ted, thanks a lot.
Oh, make sure you do change your grind setting to like a medium dose and a medium grind setting. You don't want to start right out on the finest grind setting because you can clog things up really quick. So I'd say around a 10 and then like half a dose.
All right. All right, Ted, thank you.
All right.
Want to learn more? Subscribe now so you'll know about the latest videos on everything coffee from Whole Latte Love.